So it all started with defining the scope of alignment or getting started, and then setting targets after assessing the country situation, then developing the plan that will eventually be implemented. But as a country, stakeholder engagement was quite key, and we had a series of meetings. The first key critical meeting was to bring partners, both international, national, and local, on board. So we had an inception meeting for partners alone to define the scope of the review and alignment. And I'm glad to say that in that meeting, we had UNDP country office come out to actually support in the development of the roadmap, not only to align, but to implement the NBSAP. So we're able to develop the roadmap, and they had various stakeholders again come on board. So after that critical meeting, we had another one for the technical working group that also involved experts. And I wish to highlight here that the technical working group covered both private sector, NGOs, civil society, cultural institutions, indigenous people representatives, government sectors, again, development partners. So from there, we had, again, series of meetings to really find out or develop the situation analysis based on the performance of the NBSAP 2. And we actually realized that we had implementation gaps in the NBSAP 2, although for now a number of them have been addressed. And so what to address those hindrances to ensure that NBSAP 3 is not hampered in any way in guiding the country's interventions. So after that meeting of the technical working group, we now had specific thematic working groups looking at specific targets. And here I'm glad to say that we had support from ICRAF, FAO, to particularly look at targets that relate to agriculture, fisheries, animal husbandry, connectivity, among others. So from then we started improving the initial drafts, the subsequent drafts, again with support from UNDP and BioFin to review and ensure that financing of most of the interventions is covered in the what? The updated National Biodiversity Finance Plan. So we had intense engagements until when we were able to have the initial alignment draft that we're able to submit, I think being the first country in Africa or the second in the world to do the submission. Actually, we have a whole product on policy review with regard to the alignment of NBSAP to the GBF. It is a separate report on its own policy coherency with the GBF. And we reviewed Target 6 again in line with the existing national legislation. And one of the interventions or the gaps that we noticed is that we need to develop guidelines on the management, more or less on the prevention, detection, management of invasive alien species. And I think this will be all-encompassing. For instance, for detection, we will very much be ensure that the local communities are empowered to detect early emergency of invasive species. Not only communities, even the local governments, and then prevention measures, which I think is critical and central to us, because like one of us here said, we would rather prevent than to actually eliminate. And then, of course, management for those that have already extensive and are in place. So we are looking forward to that step of development of guidelines. But like I said, having the plan is one thing, and financing the plan is a second thing. Thank you. With NBSAP 2, we realized that there was a gap in terms of mainstreaming the NBSAP in sectoral plans and activities. And this particular time, we are glad that the GBF has a specific target on collaboration, cooperation among the different multilateral environmental agreements, but also at the country level. And so this has already been emphasized in our development of the NBSAP 3. As sectors, it has been a collective effort, but it's also not enough. We need to look at the activities that are embedded in the NBSAP, especially with regard to policy coherency, to ensure that they are catered for in the sectoral laws and regulations. Because if a sectoral law or regulation is not speaking to another sector, then there is very little harmonization. And like I said, also formally, we are writing to institutions to share these documents and ensure that they are mainstream. But not only that, we have a national development plan, and already it has mainstreamed. Because once the development plan has mainstreamed the NBSAP, then all plans and financial allocations are likely to be speaking to that. But that, of course, is not enough. There is a lot that needs to be done. And maybe at this point, it will also be our humble request that at the global level, for projects that are coming in, for instance, to address the invasive and alien species, they should also speak to other sectors so that we minimize single implementation of projects. This will help bring together stakeholders to do the actual implementation and also reporting. So there is still a role to play both at the national and the global level. I think ours was more of wishing to have more and more review engagements with stakeholders. Of course, the finances were not that adequate, although I also wish to acknowledge UNEP and JEF, which actually financed the entire process with support from other partners that I've already mentioned. So if we had wished to really have more engagements with the different sectors. Then the other challenge is, of course, data, because data is the one which informs the situation analysis and the eventual strategies. So we are still lacking in terms of data, and we hope that in our NBSAPs, we are able to attract financing to collect updated data on, for instance, invasive and alien species. For instance, we have quite a number of indicators with regard to invasive and alien species. However, the baseline is still faint. How are we going to be able to benchmark the baseline of invasive species 5 years ago when we had our NBSAP 2 and now NBSAP 3 and the subsequent NBSAPs? So that presents quite big challenges with regard to developing baselines and therefore monitor our indicators and progress. Thank you so much.